Uno di quelli?
No.
Quanti buchi hanno dovuto fare? Se avessero fatto un buco solo una chiave?
Rullo, forse
No,
no,
quello.
Perché? Come si fa a sapere se stiamo cominciando?
Siamo live.
We are live. Good morning everybody. I'm Luca Zan, University of Bologna. We are here in this physical and virtual context to start with our 3 series of workshops on the transformation of European historical shipyards and arsenals. So welcome. Pete could not be here, but is connected with Zoom. So ciao Pigran. I'm making this short introduction of the day of the three workshops, and please Pigran, come in whenever you have comments to do. Okay, so basically, this is a part of the activities of the Austrian Pavillion at the Biennale Archittetura 2023, and as you are probably aware, there is this idea of working on the issue of partecipazione, participation, I would say in English. And one of the project they had with the Austrian Pavilion was to split the pavilion in two and make half of it connected to Santa Elena, part of Venice, open access, the red part, and the other half a normal activity of the within the Biennale. And the idea was to, because of the issue of participation, issue of inclusion, to have free access. To this area, to this red area by the citizens. It didn't work really like that. An issue of permission, of resistance to that. So they were not allowed to do that. So the pavilion is still as it is now. Half of it is what should have been the open access area, and still, in a sense, not open, but you can see it with this idea. This is what we would have liked to do, and we were not allowed to do. But the other part of the pavilion, the one that you can get access through the gates of the Biennale, is talking about what this idea that was not accepted. So it's really a discussion on participation and open access. Some of us have been involved in several ways in this with Franco Mancuso and Claudio Menichelli. I wrote a chapter in the catalog of the Austrian Pavillion that was really trying to involve the citizen. The other idea is what would have been the activity with the social civil society that would have been run within this half of the pavilion open to the public will take place around Venice, spread out in Venice, in place where people do not have to pay. Basically, this idea is really open access is a sort of value of this project. So here we are. What we did also in this context is the question of open access is a question which affects the Biennale for sure in the gardens and the Arsenal, the part of the Arsenal which is run the Biennale. These are, you can get there for 6 months a year, paying 24 euros. But the rest of the year, you cannot pay whatever you want. You cannot get access at all. So this is really an issue of giving the citizen possibility of access to their heritage, which is part of the Faro discourse. And so this is something that started our idea with Pigram. We tried for a couple of times with a kind of European project to run this, to start opening a table between historical shipyards. So we took this opportunity and we make this 3 series of workshops. By the way, with collaboration of IPI, which is the Association of Italian Industrial Heritage, which also is streaming our event. And thanks so much, Luca Borghini, for that. And Alessia and Angela have been really working so hard in these last days. So the idea we are streaming, we are recording, and that discussion will be on the website, on the homepage of the IPI. So even other people that could not join us today will have this opportunity. And also we are with WICO, we are kindly hosted here in Ca' Foscari. Thanks Fabrizio Panozzo for this opportunity, which is always a pleasure to share. And there is also kind of collaboration in progress that are coming out. So basically, this is focusing on the transformation of European historical shipyards. We are not interested, in a sense, if shipyards are still used as shipyards completely. This is something that it could be interesting from other point of view, but not from our point of view. Basically, it's the kind of challenges that are emerging when you have these different uses between the historical one and new ways of using or not using or destroying the historical, what is now in industrial heritage, shipyards as industrial heritage. So what we are trying to do here is this 3 workshops. Today is the first one, and it was the most difficult to organize. Hopefully, the other ones were easier because we were a bit late, and so so, but there are three, and these are this is an open list. We're still working on that. So basically, we have a couple of sites for each country, of the major ones. So we're starting with Portsmouth and Chatham. If you've been there, I guess that it's a pity to say, but they could be benchmark for many of us rather than we could be benchmark in another sense. So that in the UK, we have these two very important historical shipyards on one hand, but also very good example of transformation, reuses of this. Then we have two from Italy, which is Genoa and La Spezia. And then we have a couple from Spain. We have Barcelona, which already agreed. There was a problem in Spain with elections, so we were in contact with El Ferrol, but we are trying to work on another solution perhaps in Spain. We have Copenhagen, Ulmen, and then we have a couple from France. We have Brest, we have Rochefort, and perhaps Lorraine. Yes, something we are still discussing. We were discussing yesterday. Then we have Karlskrona from Sweden, and we are still open to other. We are still trying to decide whether we could include some other. Not that many. We have just 3 days, and you see here is the plan of the meetings and who is presenting when. And today we have Portsmouth and La Spezia, and I'm also giving some kind of that's it. And also we are talking about Venice, and basically I'm presenting a short case of Venice in the beginning, and then we come back to Venice in the end, in the third meeting. And the third meeting also perhaps we will have here Eduardo Curra, which is the president of IPAI. So we have three kinds of aims in this series of events. One is to build up a community of people that are working in similar sites with similar problems. Similar is not saying that are the same problem. They are similar. They are, in a way or another, linked to processes of at least partial transformation, partial deindustrialization, or partial demilitarization of the site, and with kind of difficulties and resistance to this change that are shared among them. So, the idea, that was something that we really didn't have in mind, but when we're talking with people, say, yes, this is something absolutely interesting for us to compare. The second idea is to build up a network to support a kind of more inclusive European project. When we try to make these proposals with the PIGRA, one of the problems was you don't have kind of strong network of scholars inside for that. So that will be one of the outcomes of these events. And also, and this is a very kind of instrumental point of view, we are Venice-based. We are based on the problems of Venice. We are, in that sense, we starting from the problems of the Venice Arsenal and the missed opportunity of opening it, transforming it, and valorizing, if I'm allowed to use this strange word, from a point of view of Venice. So basically what we are looking, in a sense, we are interested in both listening to your story on their own, but also trying to get some kind of opportunity to relaunch a debate on this incredibly interesting site, and it's incredibly interesting site of this is a situation of debate that get so little in terms of results. So having in terms of implication and suggestion from your the whole case studies that we are looking at. So the state of the art, very quickly, it's really fragmented. You know, all of us are doing our work on our own with very little interaction at the international level, with a very local focus on national and site-specific issues. So we know so much. I know quite a lot, to be honest, at that time, on Venice Arsenal. And even just listing the names, the case studies that could be relevant was really difficult, was already making research. And also, what is really interesting is that the kind of, this historical shipyards have been so crucial at really at the heart of European history. Historians rarely are interested in what happens within organizations, individual organizations. So they really refer to the fleet, to the war, to the battle, to the strategies. But it's not very sexy, the idea of, okay, what are the conditions that allowed Venice or the UK to have the production of good ships that allow the empire to do what they did. So, and this is really what we are looking at. We are looking, that's really an interdisciplinary kind of project. We are looking at history from several points of view. And also what is really interesting is that unless the world will change even worse than it's changing now, we are in a period of, a transformation of the size, deindustrialization and demilitarization. And so all these sides face very complex problems because they are huge, they are involving questions of urban regeneration. So it's really something that can be seen in all history, in a sense, and real-time history. Pegram, feel free to comment on anything on that. And it's really what really it's interesting is a kind of variety of processes across time in the past and nowadays. And particularly for us, how the past remains in what is going to be done in the present. So, yeah.
Luca, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now is a good time for me to welcome everybody and to thank for everyone's contribution, but also to pursue the point Luca is now making. The state of art here with this topic and the importance of thinking about the historical shipyards in Europe could hardly be more relevant than it is right now. One other element of this assemblage of sites that we're pulling together, this network, is that it does represent not just disconnected scholarship, but historically very connected industrial, military, economic, and organizational activity. In other words, these sites have helped over nearly 1,000 years of time to knit Europe together. And the changes that they've undergone as single spaces ramify across the whole of Europe generally. Or to put that more simply, by looking at shipyards, we can have a much better understanding of the development, not merely of organizations, but of institutions. And this is a very unexplored way of thinking about management practices, quite simply, but also historical forces more broadly. And the fact that shipyards are a neglected area of study it seems obvious when we think about it at a local level, but it's even more important to begin to address this neglect now when there are such fractures in the world around us. So that's a somewhat grandiose way of saying this is important work, and those of us that are excited by it hope that we can excite others through the agency of these workshops. Now I'll turn back to Luca to continue explaining our thinking.
Thanks, Pegram. Thanks. And it's really this double speed in terms of history, if you want, which is intriguing. We are interested in the long-term history, but we are also interested in what's happening in these days and in the history of the future, so the present. So one thing is we, from that, some of us, and we in particular from Pegram, myself, and other people working with us, we are taking a management perspective or an organizational perspective, we are looking at this. I mean, maritime history can be seen from, from sociology of fish to military history. I mean, it's so vast, immense kind of area. We are looking at from a management point of view, and this, even the whole issue of industrial heritage is something that has been addressed mainly by, I would say, architects, urban planners, some historians, and we as a community of management scholars, accounting historians, even accounting historians, scholars and historians in management, business, have been quite lazy. But we can bring something, a view which is really interesting, particularly because this, what is industrial heritage, used to be business in a way or another. So, and for us, it's talking about industrial heritage, and it's something which is really related to the basic issue of living or dying of organization. So it's quite normal that you have industrial sites that are living for a while, they are abandoned, they are destroyed, or sometimes reused and transformed. I mean, the creative destruction, and it's impossible for us as economists or business scholars to talk about industrial heritage without referring to Schumpeter's notion of creative destruction. It's the rise of new business that kills the ones. So it's a continuous process. It's innovation that makes things out of market, and that's normal. And here in particular, it's a long history of waves of abandonment, and but it's normally, in a sense, industrial heritage is to some extent the exception to the rule. Normally, you have business that rise, they develop, decline, die, and everything. So the very complicated issue is the transformation between old uses through a very dangerous period of non-use is the most dangerous because things can very quickly decay without using them, and new users. Now the problem is really how this kind of equation, if you want, is organized at different levels. So there is a process of re-cementization of the sites. I mean, there are few forms of arts that are born as art. The Palazzo Ducale was never born to become a heritage. Less so the Venice Arsenal or this area of the Macello here. So it's really kind of, this is part of the transformation of the task activity uses. And this is a very complicated interdisciplinary area where you have different kind of component and heritage, conservation, mostly within huge process of urban development and regeneration. Shipyards tend to be huge. Venice is one of those particularly huge. Portsmouth, they were so huge and transforming. It's not the small building that you can transform into a loft. Even this building is so difficult to reuse if you don't have this public uses. What else can you do? A loft of this will cost you a fortune to keep the normal temperature. So real estate and tourism is the easy way out from industrial heritage, not as possible with shipyards in general. And this is very interesting in terms of challenging between at different levels. One of the things is really how you see this heritage, both in terms of tangible and intangible. So it's interesting. It's nice that we keep these buildings as we are now, but keeping the memory of what was there inside is much more difficult. So there's an issue of preserving the walls of the architectural structure, which is the beginning. If you lose that, that will be a serious problem. But it's not just the walls that makes these sites relevant. So it's really the intangible. So from that point of view, here as management scholar, this is what we're trying to bring in, the intangible. So it's not just the wall. This was not made to be walls. It was manufacturing. There was materials. There were manufacturing products. There were machinery and plants. There were manpower. There were management. There were organizing. And the real problem here is sources. And for an architect, it's comparatively speaking, I would say, easier. You still have the buildings, you have the doors, you have the sign of transformation, you have design here and there. You can try to. For us, it's quite more complicated. You have some paintings. It took me years to get this, to think about this. Can you imagine the division of labor? If we think of production now, we think you buy the kind of component or things that you need. You were getting trees and you make ships from trees and you were cutting your. So it's very difficult to imagine that. Or you can get the painting. This is a wonderful painting that you find about the arsenal in the 1797, and you have the cordery, the ropery, so you can try to imagine what was there and how was the organization of labor. Sometimes you have wonderful opportunities with machinery. This is a cordery ropery that was a private one, which was donated to the municipality of Venice. It's not used, it's not mounted. The Biennale didn't want it in the space, and that's still there, lost. And here, this is a nice, I think this is Chatham. I'm not 100% sure. This is a very nice short movie. It's 1 minute to give you the idea what you can see, what you can understand about the ropery. We missed the sound, but it's not that important. We all, I guess, when we were young, we all made, as a game, we made ropes. In Italy, we did. So seeing how a ropery works, and if you go to Chatham, you have 400 meters where the ropery machine are still working. It's fascinating. And now you have the sounds also. This is art, I guess. It's a form of art. How long, when you see the Corderia here in Venice, I've been wondering, how can you use 400 meters? And you now can understand. Now, suppose that everything disappeared. The man did not, this is a woman, the machines, so what you get is the walls. This is what we have. What do you understand of what was going on? I guess nothing, or very, very little. So this is how can we represent what was going on. So just trying to get quicker because we were a bit late. So from that point of view, the Venice Arsenal is really one of them. I would say it's the oldest still open shipyard, not making any more shipyards, but it has been open for 850 years. So, reconstructing his history is incredibly challenging. You can write a history of an organization for almost 900 years with the different stratigraphy of organization. And from what we can bring in as expert in organizing, in business and in management, perhaps, it's a triple kind of perspective. One is looking at the history as business history, as organizational history, as accounting history. What can we say about the Venice Arsenal in this 900 years or in some of the periods in terms of what they were doing, how they were making production, how they were reporting, how they were accounting? So there is an issue of different, and in the case of Venice, it's 900 years, 850 years of stratigraphy of organizing. In most of the other shipyards, you have, in any case, centuries. So you have an incredible set of organizations where you can discuss about long-term evolution, where in the period where management, where organization emerge as important perspectives. And also, the second point, so this is really reconstructing, making making the work that normally business historians do, but rarely they shared with heritage people. I myself had this experience. I've been working on the management of the Venice Arsenal for years, publishing for years in accounting, management journals, and then I realized that architects working on the heritage of the Arsenal didn't know me. So okay, it's not a question of, it's really communities tend to be very, very separated. So this is an issue. Bringing in our history to the debate on heritage. The second is really the transition. I mean, when a site is transformed, large houses like that is transformed into university, how you keep the memory, to what extent and how. So how can a student understand what was going on? It would be nice to interview students having understand what they understand of the site. So, but it's really how we can preserve some form of memory of what was going on. We can destroy it. We can keep the walls and simply give no information, or we can make very intensive use of preserving the immaterial history. And then we can have kind of, we can play also an additional role when you have the transformation of this organization. Well, there are new organizations that in any case should be managed. So both in terms of institutional solutions, organizational solutions, budgets and whatever. This is what we try to do. So this is a kind of framework that we are trying to use, not to impose our own disciplines, but try to contaminate, the different perspectives in terms of the history, the past history, the transformation process, and the present linked to the idea of what is preserved from the past. And so this is the guidelines that we gave to our to those people that we invited to present their cases. So it's a history of buildings and spaces, which is fundamental, which is a starting point there. But also trying to look at organizational implications or requisites for that, or the drivers. When you have the transformation of some of the buildings in Venice is because you will need something else from a production point of view. So there is a link which is very difficult to build, but we can make a call for that. And also what we are looking here is a specific focus on the last years. The period of abandoning is the most critical, because it's where things tend very rapidly to collapse, and it's a period when new uses are debated and will have implications for the future. So this is some kind of suggestion for our contributors. There is an issue of transitional stage, which is incredibly interesting, could be very long, and try to reconstruct this in different cases would be particularly interesting. And also with this attention to, we're always talking about, if in Venice, the Mulino Stucchi. Rather than destroying it, it's perfect to keep it as a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stars hotel. Much better than destroying it. But what do you miss in terms of information, the historical information, and how people have access to it and can share its ability. So we are calling to, and it's a serious problem here, because none of us, interdisciplinarity, it's difficult to have interdisciplinarity in your own mind. We tend to be bloody disciplinary in ourselves. So, but this is the kind of call that we are making. And also in terms of the current operation of the site, as industrial heritage, retransform, reuse in somewhere, with a particularly focus on the multiplicity of new users, stakeholders, contradictions, and so on. So this is the kind of calls in our research, in our idea of these workshops. And this is the menu for the day. We are, as usual, out of time a bit. Yeah, we started just 15 minutes later. So we had made this short presentation of the project. I will give some information about the Venice Arsenal. Some mostly from a historical point of view, and very quickly on recent history. We come back on the Venice Arsenal on the last day in the sense of this instrumental kind of summary of the discussion. So come back, try to readdress specifically suggestions that could emerge in these 3 days to the problem of Venice. Then we have Portsmouth. If you haven't been to Portsmouth, go there. It's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So we have Karen here, accounting historian, accounting scholar, and accounting historian. Can I define? Yeah, or it's difficult to define someone in this way, but yeah. So then we have the case of La Spezia, the one of the Italian ones. We have the Admiral Dino Nascetti. It's funny in this business we also talk with the military component has been so crucial, so important. And Admiral Dino Nascetti will refer to this the experience of La Spezia. We will have also time for an open discussion before 1 o'clock that we have to close. There's a very bad news for the participant in person, which is the cafeteria is closed today. So I'm trying to understand what we can do. So if there is any other comments, Pigram, would you like to add something else?
I would just like to add that the very rapid presentation from Luca of the intellectual groundings of this project is so fascinating, but it will all become much more fascinating when we start to hear from the real cases, beginning with Venice and Portsmouth. And that I hope that everyone can see the trajectory of the project as a whole and is excited to delve into the real material in the sessions that are coming up now. So, thank you.
Great, thank you, Pigram. Is there any comments or questions? Okay, so what shall I do now? Angela, help me. Okay, thank you. So now I give the floor to Luca Zan. Hi, presenting the Venice Arsenal case. Try to do a bit quicker than I thought perhaps. Let's go. This is Venice, as you recognize. And this is really huge. It's 14 hectares, which is 1/16 of Venice. And this is very Chinese kind of style. The most beautiful, long-lasting, well-preserved, important. The most beautiful is subjective, but it's beautiful. If you go there, if you have the pleasure to go there, it's a long-lasting. It was opened in the 1100. It's well-preserved, paradoxically, I will show you. Important, it's stupid, okay, sorry, but it's important to me, and it's important also so far in terms of linking these two aspects of the history, architectural history, and the tangible and the intangible. And so here it's part of the European network of industrial of shipyards that we are trying to involve in this research. But also, what is really interesting now, from a logistic point of view, urban point of view, you see how it's not just big; it's really, in a sense, cutting into Venice. There are few paths and few 100 is less than 100 meters perhaps, that are allowing you to move from this part of the western part to St. Helena, if you're not allowed to get in the arsenal. So it's really a kind of bottleneck in the urban structure of the city. So, and this is, one of the problems that I realized in this presentation is what we are asking other people to make a short, relatively short, half an hour or something like that, presentation of the site. All of us have been working so much in this area. So this is just an example of the books that I was involved in, both in terms of writing, editing. So it's very difficult, and I forgot one at home. So it's very difficult to sum up. And so this is one of the last effort we did with this book on the Venice Arsenal. So what I will try to do is to sum up, and it will be very difficult to write a paper that sums up all this kind of interdisciplinary contribution on the transformation of the Venice Arsenal. So particularly, I'm very interested in the transformation and the dialogue between history of management and, in a sense, management of history. How you run this organization, and trying to make sense in such a long process. I mean, this is I'm sure it's more difficult than in any other case because it's so long, at least. So we have basically a period of shipbuilding that really is 850 years up to the mid of 1900. Then you have a period of dismissal, a process of dismissal, and then a debate on possible reuses. So focusing on the history of shipbuildings, there is perhaps four main periods. One is the golden age of the Republic up to the 1600. Then the slow process of decay, which ended with the collapse of the Republic. Then there is an intermediate period with the France and Austrian domination, where the arsenal was really used in very different ways within the strategic interest of the dominant nations here. And then there is the second youth, the renewal with the establishment of the kingdom and the Royal Navy, which had in Venice one of the three important bases. And it's really, you can waste your life on studying this. I mean, in terms of, this is Jacopo de Barba is the 1500 with the first presentation of a bird's eye view of Venice, and every story starting again from this part and this design to talk about the original shape of this shipbuilding site, shipyards, and also you can have the hundreds of moments of transformation of the buildings and the structure of the arsenal. So, and this is very quickly the major steps. That was Arsenale Vecchio, 1200 and 1300. Then Arsenale Nuovo, that was developed later. Then Arsenale Nuovissimo around 1500, and this is the Galeazze in 1500. So this is the historical part of the arsenal, the old part of the arsenal, and this is interesting. This presentation is by myself and Claudio Menichelli, which is an architect, was responsible. So we are trying to put together, and of course, if we could have been here, we would have underline much more the architectural part, but this is what we're trying to do. But what is interesting here is you see the transformation of the sites, and this is really crashing with information that I have as a business scholar. The transformation of the sites is within the first half of the 1500, with the idea of allowing the production of 100 galleys. That had been kind of a policy idea for years, decades, and centuries, but was never really implemented seriously. So they implemented from an architecture point of view. What I'm looking at in terms of sources from a management point of view is the reports that follow the Lepanto's battles. The Lepanto's battle, 1571, very shortly show up to be completely useless. In 6 months, the Ottomans show up with a new fleet. So the Venetians were really scared to death. Decided we should really have this 100 galleys reserve that we decided would never implemented. And they were starting having this huge effort in having this reserve. It was not working, so they were asking the people that were in charge of the arsenal to give reports. So people were reporting the situation of the 100 galleys. But in this way, they make it something so interesting for us as management scholars. They were talking about the management of the shipyard. So we can infer the priorities, the concerns, looking at the text. I mean, it's management is rhetoric in the good sense. It's text, so we can infer what they were worried, what were the problem, what were the solution. So this is what we did, and I'm very quickly on that. And we were looking at we were screening all the documents in the 1500 that were talking about the arsenal, and then we found this huge this regulation that were imposing to give report on the situation of the arsenal. And Baldissera Racchio 1586. It's really, when you read it, and if you can read Italian, we have the version in Italian. It's really incredibly modern in terms of the things they're talking about, in terms of the need of standardize the common timber, the construction process, the measures and of the different galleys. It's talking about the organization of space, the layout, and how to organize the work gangs. And it's talking what is interesting to discover is discourse of the manager is where the term management comes from, and that was normally used in Venice at that time. So, but nobody really knows that. But that is interesting. Bartolomeo Tadini, 1593, with a very interesting contribution paper on ways of controlling materials and workforce, and also with the following year with a kind of temporary structure to recover the delay, the gap in the 500 in the 100 galleys reserve, and then what we was working on this was really considered completely almost 200 years of reports of this report, making kind of text analysis of these reports, trying to see what they were talking about. So what they were worried about and the invention that were emerging in terms of cost. You know, there was not in the beginning that emerged the notion of cost, the notion of work in progress, the notion of organization of gangs and so on. So what really emerged in this research is then the invention of concepts and practice of modern management. We're already there. You know, it's not an issue of the 1800, it's not an issue of the 1900, it's not industrial revolution. Without taking any relevance in the industrial revolution, there was something more already there before, the managing thousands of people. You know, that's really the factory, the invention of the factory was there. So. And what is interesting, this seems to be more problematic and difficult than the architectural transformation. They were very rarely able to achieve the goal of 100 galleys. They were able in building the architectural structure for it, but then managing people and the resources was not that easy. So the collapse of the Republic, I mean, there is a political issue, there is a technological issue. You know, with huge ships, you have to invent this, what they call camels. They are, they were filling this with air to keep the ship higher, so like a kind of submarine. Can you imagine that the lack of competitiveness in terms of times and cost? And if you go at the Museum Navale, you still find one of these camels. So that partly the political decay, partly the technological and the what I would call the technological traps of the Mediterranean. This is really something that left Venice out of the central development. Though there was something very interesting in terms of development of the school, the naval school, and this kind of project that you see in this very sophisticated design before and after the French conquest. So the renewal, very quickly, was kind of the second youth, and it was really Venice with the Royal Navy was one of the three, with La Spezia and Taranto was one of the three main sites. And it's really, still thousands of workers with a technological shift from wood to iron, and with a continuous process of transformation of the buildings have been cutted, have been transformed higher, then reduced. Then you can make kind of animation of the continuous transformation of this building. These are the these that are being cut and make it shorter because not really used anymore. I mean, they were used to build ships inside. With the new ships, and it's too big to be kept inside. So all of this became sort of warehouse, so modern shipbuilding to shipbuilding period post, and a lot of interesting evolution in terms of production, even submarines, and these are some of the buildings that have been, the ships that have been built. This is a crucial, the Armstrong. This is one of the I think it's one of the only, no, it's the only Armstrong crane that is still kept. There were 8 in Europe, and I realized today there was one in La Spezia. I'm right. Yes, this now is gone. So it's really part of heritage and still there. So more recently, in the 1900, the more recent evolution of the space, so increasing enlargement of the space, and the new Bacini and the Casomette here, and also this new part. So toward dismissal, that was very quickly after World War II. Venice became less and less important. The command was transferred to Ancona, and the production was really reduced. So they started already even before World War II, kind of different story between the northern and the southern part. The northern was outsourced to private shipbuilding activities, and the southern part was used by the Navy. But none of these two sides was really used intensively. So the northern part was used, but mostly in this kind of center, while the other buildings were really not used. And here the same from the Navy, and not used really made a kind of the open discussion about the uses that will come back more in details in the last meeting that we have, just to make in short this long history. There was a debate on possible use starting in the 80s, and there was a very important experiment by in 1980 to use the Corderia for one shot in 1980, and then from the middle of 1990s they were using every year as one of the venue of the Biennale. And there were almost 40 years of debate. There was a first master plan in 2001. There was a wonderful, there was several projects, but one was really wonderful, made by the Navy on the reuse of the opening of a museum, a naval museum inside the Arsenal. There was a master plan in 2014 that was simply missing the museum. So this is really interesting, and this was really one of the visionary, the one that this idea of opening it to the citizen. Now, we have no secrets. That was an admiral, and I discovered that was Admiral. Pagnatello was a classmate of Admiral Nascetti, and it was really making a point. The small museum we had is really not adequate. We should make this, and we should make this also as an option to give access to the arsenal. And access is not just on this area where this is where the Biennale is, but also in the areas of the military area. We don't have secret. So this is a cultural hub of the. We don't produce anymore. This is a cultural hub of the Navy, and we must communicate, promote ourselves to the citizens. So this should be open, very open-minded. There was a concert by Claudio Baglione. There was the Italian rock star. There was inside the Arsenal, and those that could come knowing would not pay a ticket. And there's a memory. Everybody have this memory. We're totally unable to find any single picture. But if you talk to people who are more or less my age, everyone remember this concert of Claudio. But I should write Claudio Baglione asking. So, and it did. The project was wonderful. Was a bit incomplete. The public tender was really done in a bad way. Didn't work. Nobody showed up. And then the project completely disappeared. This would be, in our publication, we talk a lot about this project. And then there was a master plan, which was, despite the missing problem of the museum, was quite interesting, with the idea of having, it's too huge to make one thing. And so there was different uses. On the yellow, you have really industrial use that was at that time devoted to MOSE, the high water system controls room. The green area should have been the area of innovation. So you have CNR, you have TATIS, and the idea was to have other organizations in the heritage, in the innovation, high tech, to be involved. The blue area will be the area kept by the Navy, and the purple area is that for culture. It's nowhere written that is for the Biennale. This is how the Biennale intended it. So this is the area that Biennale kept and used it. But that was not the point. And even at that time, there was a kind of conflict in the major Cacciari at that time was thinking of opening a contemporary art museum inside, with some kind of tension with the Biennale. The current situation, again, come back on these details. The ownership was the public national real estate with different purpose for military and civil. In 2013, the Manu kept the real estate, national real estate, kept the part from the Navy for military use, and the rest was transferred to the municipality of Venice. Unfortunately, on the last minute, in a very Italian, interesting way, and there is a chapter in our book that is really describing, this last changes in the law, which make things so different. So the idea is condition of rights and de facto condition that it is. So basically, that means that all the organizations that were using the Biennale, TATIS, CNR, MOSE, will have it for free without paying any single penny. And, in the sense, whether he was trying to avoid the kind of institutional transformation, that is, in a sense, phrasing the kind of individual rights, making it impossible to have a more general kind of solutions with kind of that also have an impact with the situation with the Mose, and there was a very difficult moment in the history of Venice with the kind of corruption for Moses, so the mayor was forced to resign. There was a special commissioner for 18 months, and when we had one of our seminar, one of the representative of the local government, the new local government, said that Arsenale is not a priority. So, and what is really now taking place, it's this kind of very expensive, very upper class kind of annual boat shows, and in any case, it's taking place for 4 days a year or 1 week, but I guess 4 days. And another way of using it was the Dolce & Gabbana fashion show that was in 2021. That was hailing. I mean, maybe there is a saying in Venice, "La man di Dio è grande," the God's hand is huge. So maybe he or she didn't like this way of using the Arsenal. I mean, this very mundane kind of events, but are very spectacular. It could be done, but there's so much more to do with this kind of event. So I'm trying to get quicker and just showing you pictures on the conservation. This is the situation after a few decades of no news. I mean, it's really collapsing. These are old constructions, and when the roof starts falling, it's really terrible how it is. But don't be negative. Paradoxically, in the last decades, without understanding and defining what the intangible part, defining new uses were so difficult, so controversial. They were so good in preserving the physical. Once again, working on walls is, relatively speaking, easy. And they spend so much. And what is interesting, normally you sponsor, they give you 1 penny and they want 3 square meters of. Nobody wants to appear there. And it's so difficult to reconstruct the huge amount of money that have been used so well. And this is now, if you go in the Arsenal, if you're able to get in, unfortunately, not always, go there now. There's a Biennale, go to the Austrian Pavillion. But you see a very good situation in terms of restoration. Very interesting also example and experiment from an architecture point of view of this kind of building inside the building, so they are not intrusive, they are reversible, they can be in principle dismantled, so without, and they also this wonderful tower that has been that was a tower to build the mine and the ships. Incredible good restoration, incredible good, and then not used for since then, so it started to collapse again. And here, but if you Google, you don't see the roofs falling anymore. So a lot have been done, much less in terms of research from a historical and management point of view. Nothing in terms of presenting to the citizens. So major problems. You still have this kind of institutional fragmentation. There is this controversies about the museum. Between having a museum which is huge or having nothing, not even and believe me, if you get in the Arsenal, your reaction will probably be wow, and that's it. It's impossible to understand it unless you study it, unless you study with an architecture to understand the transformation of buildings. It will be impossible to understand. So there must be something, and that has been still open to discussion. This is why we are here. But also, we love the Biennale. I mean, but there are serious problems here in the conflicting uses. So, and particularly, one thing is, not just what I was referring before, the 6 months that are not accessible at all, but even when they are accessible, this is on the left. You have the Biennale that was the Architecture Biennale, the last one of the previous one. So there was an idea: keep the cordery, the ropery, without any obstacle. This is industrial landscape. You have to see it. And this is, on the right hand, is the Biennale Arte last year. So they're completely non-respecting the context. They are killing the industrial landscape. You cannot see, you cannot perceive anything. So it's not just the 6 months that you cannot see anything and the 6 months that you have to pay. It's hidden. It's really so it would be very easy from an architect point of view, asking the curator to respect the view. And that is what they did a few years ago. And also the kind of conflicting use where you cannot put this cautery machine in yours. So access, that was some interesting experiment. These are the walls. All shipyards in all over the world, they have had strong barriers to enter because it was secret. It was kind of, and this Venice is really not an exception. And this was the kind of initiative in 2014 that were really having open access to the site. So, and huge. Sorry. So basically, I'm just keeping in 1 second trying to make this within the framework, how you could link this kind of transformation process and moment within the framework that we were providing, and then just very quickly try to go to the conclusion. But nothing really happened. Still, the situation after 40 years is the same. No use, and no discussion on possible reuses. There was a proposal by the Navy that disappeared. There was, in the meanwhile, the proposal by Forum Futuro Arsenale that there will be some presentation even within the Austrian Pavillion activities. So, but basically, this kind of forgetting by doing, the waste of energy. I mean, if you look at this document and you read it, so much, so interesting, so the amount of cleverness that is there, and then nothing really happened. So the idea is really and this is why we are organized, why we are here in a sense, not simply as a kind of interesting research, but also to make things happen in a way or in another. And that's what I'm always, what is really paradoxical, ironic, in a place where Baldissera Dracchio 1596 was really, in a sense, providing a good example, early example of management. You see, is so badly managed in terms of transformation. So Baldissera Dracchio probably turns in his grave. So here we are, why we're asking you to give us suggestion examples of bad and good and bad, good or worse practice, not that simply best. So just to restart this debate. So I'm done, a bit late, but I just cover, I saved 7 minutes. So I don't know, let me, if there is, we are a bit late, but if there is some question, we can, or we can leave for the final session. So if there's not any urgent question, I would suggest, that should have been, so we can go with the Portsmouth presentation. Yes, and after that we can try to organize a coffee break. Okay, so Karen, please join us. Angela, this name is perfect for you.
I can
So so to give a bit of space for.
Yes, absolutely. The controller is right there.
It's you?
That's right. Nice. The light. And put in space. This one goes forward, this one goes backward. Brilliant. I have some introductory music. There we go. Okay, thank you very much, Luca. A very interesting presentation by Luca, which actually fits really nicely with the presentation I've prepared for today. So Luca has talked a lot about the past, about the history of the Venice Arsenal. Is that not working properly? Okay. Apologies. Can you hear me online as well? Brilliant. Thank you, Pegram. So he's talked a lot about the past and about the history of the Venice Arsenal, but not much. Well, he's talked about what isn't happening at the moment. What I'd like to do today is to talk about the present at Portsmouth, what is happening at Portsmouth right now, how Portsmouth has already been transformed, and the plans for transforming Portsmouth into the future. Portsmouth is the only island city in the UK, so it has a very special place in terms of UK naval heritage. The main part of the Portsmouth dockyard is still in ongoing use, and that has an impact on the way in which it is currently used as well. So it's still being used by the Royal Navy. The other part of the dockyard, in the past, across the water in the Gosport, there was a place called Priddy's Yard, which when Portsmouth dockyard couldn't expand, they started doing victualling, so the supplying of ships from across the water in Gosport, and that has yet to be transformed. There have been some transformations, but there are big plans for transforming that as well. So a little bit more about that later. So let me just tell you a little bit about Portsmouth and the heritage and transformation of a historic dockyard. So here is Portsmouth, the dockyard and the naval base, and you can see on my left, you can see an aerial view, if you like, of the dockyard. Not quite complete. That is, let's go on a little bit further, but that is the main bit that's open to the public. On the right-hand side, you can see the main gate of Portsmouth Dockyard, a historic picture of that. What I'd like to talk about firstly is the ongoing projects for reuse of heritage buildings. And we have, so again, Portsmouth Dockyard is split into two bits, if you like. There are the two parts that are the museum. So there are the warships, and there is the Mary Rose Museum, and there is the Royal Navy Museum as well. And then there is the property trust, so the Naval Base Property Trust, which manages a lot of the heritage buildings around the Portsmouth area. And the picture at the top of here is of the offices of the Portsmouth Naval Base Property Trust. So they're based on the dockyard, they're ongoing working out of the dockyard. So they're focusing on the challenges associated with transforming historical shipyards as heritage sites on a daily ongoing basis, and have many ideas for both what they've done in the past and for what they plan to do going on in the future. So they're quite mindful of the associated issues for preservation, protection, and business use of these heritage buildings. There's a whole mixture of heritage buildings. We don't have quite the same scale of heritage buildings as perhaps the Venice Arsenale has, the lovely red brick buildings such as we're sat in today. But we do have a good handful of those buildings. Has been a lot of transformation of those buildings already. The project that I'm involved with is considering the potential conflicts between heritage, business and innovation. So I'm Dr. Karen McBride. I'm a professor at University of Portsmouth, associate professor at University of Portsmouth. And I have a crossover between business. I work within the business school. I'm by profession an accountant. So I'm quite used to valuing of things, not always in monetary terms. And I'm also one of the committee of the Heritage Hub, which is an interdisciplinary centre across the University of Portsmouth. So again, Luca talked about working with architects, working with geographers, working with people that have that wider perspective on what's going on. What I'd like to look at today are some case, and what we're going to look at in this project are some case studies within the naval dockyard of Portsmouth. So various themes for my presentation today, and various themes that we've started, or I've started doing some interviews of people that have been involved in these transformations across the dockyard, and the tensions, if you like, maybe between history and heritage, between transformation, between preservation, protection, and use of buildings. Socioeconomic impacts as well. We want to do all these things. How do they get paid for? So it's crass, I know that, but somehow somebody somewhere has to pay for all the exciting things that we want to do with these heritage buildings. And there is a tension in preservation and innovation. A little more of that later. So as I said, today I'd like at some case studies. There are various buildings within Portsmouth. There's a lot of buildings within the Portsmouth dockyard that have been transformed, but very key ones. And today I'd like to look at the cell block studios, houses of which numbers 4 and 7 have been transformed, the pay office, the ships, of course. So there's the big ships, there's the Warrior, there's the Victory, there's the wreck of the Rose. And then there's lots and lots of other smaller vessels that are owned by the Portsmouth Naval Dockyard Property Trust. And there's lots of exciting ideas around making those accessible to the public for trips around the dockyard and things like that. So small powerboats, large powerboats, and other vessels. Those studies are the ones that are managed by the PNBT, the Portsmouth Naval Dockyard Properties Trust. Then you have the same site. So when you go in through the gate, on the same site, sort of the next stage further on, you go past the ships. The next stage is the various museums. So you have the Royal Naval Museum, the Mary Rose Museum, and the warships that are part of the dockyard. Then there's the potential transformation. So there are still many buildings that haven't yet been transformed. There are the block mills. So one of the first areas for production in the world, although Luca, it seems, might be arguing with this, from the time of our conflicts with the Napoleonic Wars, there have been block mills which produce the pulley blocks for the warships. And that was a form of mass production. It was one of the first places where stages were used and pre-industrial revolution. There are the other boathouses. So there are another 5 boathouses within the dockyard, which many of them are brick built. And there are plans for reuse of those. Again, some things Luca touched upon about them being so large and so difficult. And that currently some of them are being used on a sort of temporary basis, but there are plans to do that in a more rigorous way. Then you have the Admiralty buildings, and those are, so when you go in the gateway to the dockyard, on the right hand side before you go in the gateway, well, it's part of the, but you can't see them when you go through the gateway, but there's a whole raft of Admiralty buildings which currently are not in use, which are beautiful, beautiful buildings that could be used for something. So equally problem to that of the Venice Arsenale. And then more recently, the Property Trust has achieved permission, if you like, from Portsmouth City Council to call the dockyard the Heritage Centre or Heritage Area of Portsmouth. Portsmouth, being an island city, doesn't really have a main centre that isn't a shopping centre, if you like. It doesn't really have a main historic centre because it was quite bombed during the Second World War. So a lot of what is there is not heritage. It's older buildings, and obviously it is heritage in terms of there's all different stages of history. But for the dockyard and those buildings, that really is a heritage area and can be the historic centre of Portsmouth and will be the historic, or is the historic centre of Portsmouth. And then, as I said, across the water in Gosport, there's Priddy's Yard, which again has a lot of heritage buildings, and there are very, very ambitious plans for turning that into open space, use, and ideas. But the biggest problem with that, a large funding bid went in order to try and transform that, but there needed to be equal funding, and that would involve the building of houses and transformation of some of the properties into housing. So again, there's these tensions between paying for what you want to do and perhaps potentially destroying what you want to do. So what I'd like to do now is show pictures. Actually, they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I have many, many thousand words here for you. My chapter's already written. So this first one is the cell blocks project at Portsmouth. So when you go in the gate to the dockyard, on the left-hand side is a smallish relative to the others brick building, which you would hardly notice when you go through the gate. So a visitor to the dockyard would hardly notice this large but smallish in terms of the other buildings brick building. That, along with the University of Portsmouth, has been transformed into creative office space. So you can see in my first picture, you can see the red building. You can also see on towards the top of that a rather glass addition to it. And one of the things around the Portsmouth transformation is that if new parts are to be added to heritage buildings, they have to look modern, they have to look new. Because in this way, you are differentiating between that which is heritage, is preserved, and you're trying to preserve, and that which is modern and you've added and you've put on those buildings. So you can see that is a space for the people using the building, for them to meet, etc., and for them to be able to have communal events, etc. So my next picture is the corridor on the first floor, and you can see that the office space literally cell blocks. So when you go down there, you can open the little peepholes and you can see if the people are in their offices. The space has been reasonably well preserved, although some people would argue that, so you can see on some of the pictures, you'll see plastic coverings for some of the light fittings and things like that, and that hasn't necessarily gone down that well in terms of preserving those buildings. So you can see there some of the working spaces. Again, there's the meeting room with the mezzanine floor that is the glass pod, if you like, on the top of the building. And there are some of the office spaces, which are literally, as I said, most of the offices are the cell blocks. So the cell blocks were used when boats were in dock and sailors came off of boats and went into town and had a few drinks and became rather perhaps out of control because they'd had a few drinks. They would get thrown into the cell blocks to be kept overnight until they went the next day back onto or were put back onto their ships. And this is the use of the original cell blocks. And again, on that middle picture, you can see the plastic coverings that has been a bit of a contention around this building. So that's one of the spaces that has been adapted for other use and for, am I doing that? Oh yes, of course, that's always possible. Thank you. So that's one of the buildings that has been adapted for other use. And indeed, some of the work I've been doing, I've been interviewing the people that are using that creative space. And it's used by architects, angle poised lamps, various people that work for wood, sound engineers, etc. So the space is very beloved, if you like, of the creative mind, and they like to invite people to that space in order to have meetings, etc. The next places I'd like to talk about on the naval dockyard are the boathouses. Now, these are somewhat more modern, and these are used in a slightly different way, and this is a little bit more what Luca was talking about the reuse or the redevelopment or the carrying on of the industrial heritage, and rather than just the building heritage, the use of those buildings going on to the past. So you'll see here, this is boatyard number 4, and boathouse number 4 is still, what have I done? Currently used as a boathouse. So one, the shipbuilding colleges was run out of here for a while. There's joinery that takes place. It's still very much a working boatyard or boathouse. But you can also see in the background to that picture that there's a mezzanine floor, and the mezzanine floor is a restaurant and a bar. And again, it's a very nice space for people to come, have a meal, have a drink, enjoy the ambiance of being on a dockyard. Out the window, you can see the Warrior, the first ironclad ship. And you can also see the modern Spinnaker Tower, which is a 2000s a Millennium project. Didn't quite get built in time for the Millennium, but it's a Millennium project representing a sail and Portsmouth's naval heritage. The second boathouse that is currently being transformed is boathouse number 7, and in the front of this boathouse is a museum and a souvenir shop. And then in the back of the boathouse, as you can see, again, is a very large space that can be used for, it's open on a daily basis as a cafe and a restaurant, but it can also be used and is used for evening events. And the space is transformed for evening events and conference use and things like that. The other place I'd like to talk about on the dockyard is the old pay office. And this is currently being used by a project called Ankle Deep, which again, there's an involvement of the university here. So this is the old pay office out of which the workers on the dockyard were. You can see in front of it, this blue building, that's the entrance to it. So that's been retained as the original was. And then inside you can see it's a large open space, a large creative space, which is currently being used for various art projects, ceramics, etc., and meeting places for students, artists, creatives across the university. And that is a project called Ankle Deep, which is partly, as I said, the University of Portsmouth, partly Anglepoise Labs, and partly other the Portsmouth Naval Base Trust. So again, a very nice creative space that it's been used for. So here are the, so now we're moving a little bit further back into the dockyard, and we're looking at the Maritime Museum. So the Maritime Museum, 3 main ships. As I said, there's a lot of other boats and ships, etc. So we have HMS Warrior. I've put these in the order in which you come across them as you walk through the dockyard, because currently I'm looking at the present, not in the order of age. So you can see actually they go back in time. So the first one you come across is HMS Warrior from 1860. This was the first armour-rated iron-hulled warship, and it sailed out of Portsmouth and is now preserved on Portsmouth. Again, it's a mixture of uses. So it's used as a museum. You can go on it, you can see the warship, you can read the information about the warship. But equally, it's used, and I probably should have included a picture showing downstairs with the galley, which is used for events as well. So so you can hire the ship, and you can we had a conference, a counting history conference recently, and we had the drinks party on board the galley of the ship. You can also have food there. They will do catered events as well. We were just a few too many people for a catered event. The second ship you come across is HMS Victory. So this is the world's oldest naval vessel that's still in commission. So essentially, potentially, the Navy could the Victory to war because it's still a commissioned battleship. It was Lord Nelson's flagship for the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. And then you have, going further on again, you then come across at the very back of the dockyard a very modern building, a huge modern building. It's a new build, and it was built to house the Mary Rose, the wreck that sunk just off the coast of Portsmouth, just off the coast of Southsea, the warship of the English Tudor Navy of King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII was the king that set up the Royal Navy in the UK. Prior to his reign, the Royal Navy wasn't a navy at all. It was a bunch of merchant ships that would get commissioned for war and then would be decommissioned after the war was over. But he set up a Royal Navy, had its own ships that were specifically for him to use, not for him to use, for the Royal Navy to use. The Mary Rose sank battle in 1545. It was raised in 1982, and over a very long period until very recently, until the new museum was built, it was being preserved, dried, and put into a position where people could go and see it. There was a temporary cover over it for a long time, but now it has its own museum. And there's been very clever presentation of the ship. As you can see, because it's sunk sideways, there's only the half of it, and the half of the ship, there's a walkway down through the water. So you've got the ship on your right hand side, and you've got the things that were found in the ship in the right places on the left hand side. They have far more artifacts than they can actually show at any one time, but there is a representation of where things were found on the ship on the left hand side as you walked through this glass gallery, if you like, of the ship and its contents. So the project, or there's a few projects that I'm involved with, but this particular project that I'm involved with interviews key players of the Portsmouth Naval Base Property Trust. So during this project, I've talked to the CEO of the Naval Base Trust, and I've talked to the head of development. I've also talked to various project partners, creatives, curators using the spaces. And I've also talked to the users of the buildings, the audiences of the buildings, and people that have been involved not only in the past development, but also present involvement within that. So I've shown you a little bit about the history and the heritage and the current use of the areas. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the socio-economic impacts, or the local area, the historic centre, the access. So currently there is a project underway to open up historic dockyard to make it more accessible. It costs a reasonable amount of money to go onto any of the warships there. So part of the museum, you can pay to go onto the warships. You can pay to go and have a look at the Mary Rose. Once you've paid your access, you do get access for a whole year. So it is a good investment. But in terms of access to the population, there are ways in which it could be made more accessible, and the whole historic area could be made more accessible. So the idea is that the historic centre of Portsmouth, and that they're already working on an access card which will be freely available for people to go onto the dockyard, to look at the ships from the outside, to get involved in events that are going to be taking place there. There's various co-creations that take place with the university and with local people. There are plans for theatre production, indeed turning one of the boathouses into a theatre. There are plans for classic concerts, but also pop concerts on the area, for people promoting other local events, and to use the area on summer evenings for people to enjoy the facilities and to get involved in cultural events there. I guess thinking about that, looking at that and talking about that, we also have to talk about the tensions. I've alluded perhaps to how these things get paid for, and the business side of preservation and innovation and reuse of heritage buildings. And seeking to do these projects is not easy. And funding is generally only so much. Often funding is match funding, so there has to be some money-making venture up front that helps with funding various historic projects. The other thing about Portsmouth is that it's still a working naval dockyard or working naval base. So I talked about walking through the dockyard, and beyond the Mary Rose is the working naval dockyard and the naval base. That means that access to the whole area is governed by the rules that relate to it being part of the nation's defences. So potentially, if there were to be, goodness forbid, a world war or something like that, the whole area would have to be shut down. Access to the dockyard it's relatively, if you're going there as a visitor to see the sites, to see the museums, to see the buildings, to have a coffee, to indulge in the restaurant, etc. But if you're working out of there, deliveries have to go through. So there's a checkpoint, basically, at the entrance. There's a checkpoint where your bags are checked and you go in through the ticket office. And some of my interviewees have said that sometimes it's a little bit difficult getting to the cell blocks project, for example. You might paper for the printer, but the person can't drive onto the naval dockyard to deliver your paper for the printer, etc. So there are considerations because it's a working naval base. But given that, Portsmouth did a very good job of preserving history and heritage with regeneration and funding. So there are these links with the previous two areas or themes that I've been looking at. And this idea of trying to retain some element of that heritage, that industrial dockyard. It's not just a place where warships went to war. It was also a working dockyard. It was the block mills, etc. So it needs to be preserved as an industrial dockyard too. Various other projects. So the University of Portsmouth and a handful of us from the Heritage Hub have been involved in a huge £3.5 million project trying to build a national collection of wrecks. So throughout the UK, so the Mary Rose is one of those wrecks. There are wrecks off of the Needles. There are wrecks off of the Isle of Wight. It's one of 5 major discovery projects awarded 14.5 million from the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And part of that, and the reason why I mention it today, is that we've recently been interviewing audiences at the Mary Rose. So the Mary Rose has got a new 4D discovery project. And they have 4D presentation, a cinema, etc. And we've been interviewing the audiences to that to see how they perceive that of heritage, etc. So that's part of the People and the Sea project. So I am afraid I have no idea of time, because actually there is no clock on any of these computers here, and there's no clock in the room. You might have seen me randomly sort of going like this. That's because I have no idea of how long I've been. I just wanted to share with you as a very last thing. So this is an aerial view of Portsmouth. Up in the top right-hand corner is the Portsmouth Naval Dockyard and the museum part of it. As I said, the rest goes on beyond there. You can see the Spinnaker Tower, and that demarks it. But then on the left of this project is the whole area of Gosport, which is Priddy's Yard, which victualling. So the food on board ships, the brewery, the storage of all that food back during the time of the Napoleonic Wars was based in Gosport on Priddy's Yard. And Priddy's Yard is another huge area that could be redeveloped. Indeed, there are, as I said, very, very big plans for having a huge open-air theatre with the sea as a backdrop, and cultural events there. It's just a question of trying to repurpose some of the buildings. Some of the buildings are repurposed. There are restaurants and pubs and other things on that site. But again, there's many more ideas for what be done. So whilst Luca says Portsmouth is a good example of how a dockyard has been transformed, it's also a really good example of how dockyards could be and are being and will be being transformed. So thank you very much. As I said, I'm Dr. Karen McBride. If you want to contact me, please do. And if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you. Oh, okay.
So, and just one critique too. I mean,
Please.
the picture of the many rows you propose is really, I mean, it's
Small.
when you go there, it doesn't give the feeling when you get there. You know, and even in terms of, I would say, creativity of the creators. You know, you have 1/3 of a ship. You see, it's really 1/3. It's not even a half. It's just a slide of the ship. And what they did, they turn on the wonderful setup with lights, etc. So you see the kind of section of the ship. It's really so done. I mean, that I think that really, I mean, it's really, it's not only recovering a ship, but how you present, which is really.
And actually that the 4D presentation does, it tells you the story of how the ship was raised from the seabed and what happened next. And actually I had a real problem in choosing photos for this presentation for exactly that reason, because all the photos just don't do justice. They're cropped in some way just for them to be able to be photos, and knowing the area you see, there's so much more. For every photo I included, there's so much more context.
Really, that's really a good example of, serious historical stuff, research and protection, because of protection itself, and making it fun. It's entertainment, something that we use. So that is interesting. One of the things, we decided to include both is really, maybe not everybody knows, but here in Venice there is a gallery there, 1,300 galleries that are still 2 or 3 kilometers from somewhere that was discovered 20 years ago. And making kind of excavation to do urgent investigation. Was not any place to get for the stories of cover, which is not the worst choice. I mean, recovering archaeology is always a good choice. But what's really crazy, you missed the opportunity how many 13 galleries are in the world.
Yeah.
And what you do with this, bringing in the arsenal.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So this, I mean, this, and if you work, there are 2 couples of examples in Portsmouth, but even the victory is very well presented. But if you go there is the Baza is another example.
Yes. Yes.
And also the research is so, I'm saying, sexy. You can make a study and make people having fun when you have this wonderful project of recovering the ship, excavating. So, and it's.
You have to be careful, though. I think you have to be very careful, because it has to be done in a way that preserves the heritage and preserves history, and doesn't turn it into a fairground attraction. So you're looking for it to be fun and interesting in a historic, cultural way. You're not looking for bright lights and craziness. Well, maybe you are looking for craziness, but it needs to be done in a way that preserves the integrity, if you like.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But the other thing that there are so many other examples of what you were saying. And I think the housework number 4, which is really the idea of in Spain, or there is this of maritime activities, knowledge and culture, which is really something that is an issue that was under discussion even. Just to give space for local citizens and local association to bring not just the heritage, it's the living heritage.
Yes, it's a wider definition of heritage, isn't it? Heritage is not just the buildings, it's not just the things that do, it's that wider definition of understanding that our history is more than just the buildings we built. It's the trades we did and beyond that. So yes, it's nice to see a preserved building which also preserves the trades that came out of that building as well. Yes, absolutely.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think it's a good opportunity for me to jump in virtually because what you're both saying is there's so much more we can do with modern technologies, not just in terms of active reuse of industrial heritage, but also of scholarship around industrial heritage, and the way we can combine new insights in old spaces to create something that's much bigger than the sum of its parts. So, like, in other words, complaining about photographs being cropped or giving a limited sense of what the space is really like, but with digital mechanisms, 3D reconstructions of places, we can bring things to life in a way that's really rigorous, but also really entertaining.
Yes.
So hitting that sweet spot between edutainment and well-informed adaptive reuse. And I think this project has an opportunity to do a lot more if it embraces technology, like we're doing now, by beaming me into the room because I can't be there personally. So it's a slightly selfish statement, but also a way of inviting everyone else involved to think really broadly about what we could do with such a network if we make it both as vital in real life as in virtual life.
Yes, absolutely, Pegram. And I'm involved in another project which we're hoping to get AHRC funding for, which is all around the valuation of digital heritage assets. So that idea of taking heritage that little bit further and using those digital abilities that we have in order to make heritage and history available to a much wider public and much more accessible. Yes, you're completely right. Thank you for that comment.
There are other comments? Yeah. Can you just
Okay, so I was wondering if you could expand further on how did you negotiate the reuse of the spaces? So how did the project of the co-working areas and how did it come up? And like I was thinking about it connected to tensions. So I was wondering if there were like conflicting projects over the spaces of the dockyard. Thank you.
Yes, that's a really interesting question. So in fact, as often is the case with these things, it's relationships between peoples. So the cell blocks project, for example, was a joint project between the Property Trust and the University of Portsmouth. And it was mutually agreed that they would try and get the funding for the project. They had perhaps they had the same objectives, but they had maybe different objectives. The university was looking for space, so they have various innovative areas where creatives and other people can work out of, linked with the university. There's different areas, and this has turned actually into the sort of flagship, if you like, So the idea was put forward to try and have this creative space, but preserving the integrity of the original building. So it was that tension between, and again, sorry, perhaps it's because I'm an accountant, but coming back to money and funding, there was a tension between the funding to enable it to happen and what everybody wanted in the real world. So, as I said, I've been talking to the various people that were involved at the time, and you can see some of the tensions, some of the things that didn't quite happen as people originally planned them, as they originally would have liked them to have been, but that came down to the funding to be able to do it. So it's completely right. There are tensions. There are slight conflicts, perhaps, around the use of space, particularly in heritage buildings, because from an architectural purist point of view, you would want to preserve everything you possibly could whilst making it usable space, whereas perhaps from a business point of view, you might be more willing to compromise on things. But it is very lovely space, and the people that are working out of it won't move on. The idea was that once the little bit, so it's supposed to be little businesses in cell blocks, and then as they became bigger businesses, they would move on to the other spaces that Portsmouth has to offer. And in fact, there's various of the university facilities that the people use working out of these spaces. So they're all three of the spaces offer the same potential for using university facilities, etc. But the people in the cell block, the offices in the block, they're really wedded to their space, and given that they're creatives, as I said, talking to them, they really enjoy inviting people in to see them, to have a meeting in a cell, and to have a meeting in the wider space that is part of that heritage. It makes a nice story. Business.
Karen, as an editor or co-editor with Pigram of a book, if things work well, so there are a couple of things that I would ask you to investigate more, or simply tell most. One thing is, from what you say, I mean, the history of the project as a whole is interesting to me, and there seems to be overwhelming grand project, and then some ad hoc individual projects. Which I have an idea of this way of working would be particularly interesting to see. You know, you don't have to start doing everything all at the same time, costing millions of euro. Perhaps you can have, but in any case, have few very clear statement or agreement and commitment at the beginning seems to be crucial. Not necessarily a master plan detailed on everything, but some form of commitment, which is something really is what we missed here and then. So understanding the story of Portsmouth in terms of what had happened, and the institution, the foundation, if I'm right, itself would be an interesting part.
Yes, absolutely. And another part of the project that I'm doing for this, looking at that. But Portsmouth is quite interesting from that point of view, because as I alluded to earlier, there are the two concerns, if you like, that govern the space. So there's the museum side of it, but then there's also this property trust, which looks for ways to use the buildings within the dockyard. And so they've relatively recently had a change of CEO in the last couple of years. But they've always had a long-term strategic vision for what they'd like to do. And then they've They have various things that underpin that. Like, for example, I also mentioned the fact that if they build something new, it's got to look new.
Sure.
Because in a way, you're not trying to hold something out to be something it's not. You're saying, we've built new onto this. This is the development.
There are other ways to distinguish what is original and what not.
Yeah,
But
of course. But that, yes, that's the policy they've gone along with. And there were lots of other buildings I could have put into this presentation that would have shown exactly that in action. And it looks very attractive and it's very, very well done. But they have a strategic vision, and then they have what we can do, what we're able to do, what we're going to seek funding for first, what would make impact, what would achieve our objectives, what would provide access for people. So as I said, the most recent thing that's happened, that it's not cost-free, but it has been able to be done in a relatively straightforward way, is this access ticket for local people and other people to go onto the dockyard and to see what's happening there, to go and have a coffee, to go and have a meal without having to go on one of the warships, or without having to go in the museum, without having to, they can just go into the space and enjoy the space. And the plan for that is to develop that further with, as I said, cultural events and rejuvenation of. But you're completely right. There's a long-term plan, and then there's the short-term objectives of what you can do and are able to do.
There's something we can learn from that also. And also, given that you're an accountant, having a bit more details on money. Investment.
I've got lots of that sort of thing.
I know.
Actually, I thought I wouldn't bore you
No,
with today.
No, but it's not, you know, one of the serious things that coming out, bigger, as we all said before, I mean, getting here, we realize that we are asking so much. I mean, so that will be a couple of books for each of us to write.
Exactly.
So there's something we can do in terms of, summing up a debate, or simply without doing too much in-depth, innovative research will be important as a process of sharing. So
yes,
understanding,
absolutely.
even in terms of results, in terms of ticketing, in terms of, that will be real. When you talk, if we want to say anything, that's the first question anyone will say arise. But that's wonderful. But how much they put it and how much they get it. So this is something that we will ask you for the final version of the thing.
As I said, I've got lots of numbers, but you really didn't want numbers on a morning in Venice.
But this is really contamination, Catherine. So, Pete, raising your hand, yes?
Yeah, raise your hand. Just want to take the slight point to add is that different perspectives that we can take on all this are what makes it so productive. And we've also just now kind of alluded to the policy and administrative framework for thinking about everything. In other words, if there's a policy around clearly getting new structures from old ones, that might obtain in one place but not in another, and it might affect the whole trajectory of adaptive reuse, such that, say, Venice would look very different from Portsmouth.
Yes.
Lucas raised this in his earlier work, that the policy framework, the administrative institutions, the legal and financial institutions in a place are just as determinant of reuse as much more local issues or more recent historical and political forces. I mean, another way to think about that too is, like, the last thing on earth Venice needs more of is tourists. So building hotels in the arsenal is not a likely adaptive reuse. But one thing it could use would be stimulus to maintain the shrinking demographic profile of the city. In other words, good housing. That's not an adaptive reuse that would be appropriate in other sites, but it might be very appropriate in the arsenal. But achieving that through the political and administrative and legal landscape of the present it has proved extremely difficult. So anyway, it's a way of saying one of the things that's so rich about this is the actually quite different perspectives that take priority at each site, and coming up with ways of generalizing across those differences is going to be a really interesting part of the whole project.
Okay, so thanks so much, Karen.
Thank
Well
you.
done. Thanks so much. And congratulations again for your wonderful site. My suggestion is that we have a coffee break now. Perhaps it's more 20 than 15 minutes for those that are following us. So back soon at 11:40. So it's easier. Okay. Thanks so much. Yes. Possiamo lasciare qui la roba?
Ok, è un problema se si copre queste note qua?
No, perché
così.
mi riguarda.
Questa musichetta, chi è che l'ha scelta? Luca?
Luca.
Ah, Luca, brutta musichetta. La prossima
Ok,
volta
gli
ti
diciamo
do
che ci siamo.
la musichetta giusta.
Prego.
Okay, so we can start the third presentation. We have the Ammiraglio Nascetti, which you can also tell us shortly about your CV when you start your presentation. And Ammiraglio is talking about La Spezia. La Spezia, as I mentioned, was one of the three main shipyards of the Royal Navy after the unity of Italy. And so that's something that is more, if I understand correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, is more kind of project and a wish to do something more than something that has been already done. Myself and Ammiraglio Nascetti were listening to the Portsmouth presentation with a bit of envy and a bit of we will be able to do something similar in this country, which is so complicated from administrative and decision-making point of view. So thanks so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First of all, a short presentation itself, very short indeed. But I left from the Navy in 2010, or better, the 30th of December 2009, because I was close to the reach 65 years, and for reason connected with the pension, I had to give up my career at the end of to stop my career 7 days before reaching 65. The reasons are too complicated to be explained in a foreign language for me. But anyhow, I spent more than 40 years in the Italian Navy, reaching the maximum level of my career as a vice admiral. And after my retirement, I took for 7 years around the responsibility of the University Pole of La Spezia. And not a professor, because I acted authorized when in my age. I was authorized by the Navy to teach spacecraft propulsion at the University of Genoa, but it's a long time ago. But anyhow, it's in summary. In the last part of my career, I was responsible of the La Spezia Naval Shipyard for 3 years, and but I spent more than also other 4 years responsible of the underwater system. Starting in 1990, if I remember well, for 10 years I was the Italian representative inside of the scientific National Scientific Committee of representative in NATO, and then from 2001 and 2004, I acted as the chairman of the NATO Naval Armament Group in Brussels. Then after that, simply I am here as let me say, in a strange position. I am still an officer of the Italian Navy, a retired officer, but I am a retired officer indeed. And but I got nominated scientific advisor of the naval staff in Rome. I don't know exactly what the meaning of that. I was to be an expert in naval warfare, undersea warfare, but now I am acting in a completely different environment. I'm taking care of the arsenal of La Spezia in terms of trying to save to save something of the heritage of the arsenal, simply because I was employed for 3 years as a director. So that's all. And so let me go through my presentation. I'm sorry, I can't play without reading because my English is becoming rusty, and so I need to read something and then to make comments of a picture. I'm sure that picture sometimes and photos play a role that give information at the same level of words, and luckily, I would say in my case. So my presentation is aimed at describing how the La Spezia Arsenal and Naval Base and the annexed Naval Technical Museum should be modernized following decision taken at the level of Minister of Defense. In few words, we should evaluate the risk associated with the modernization process and which measures must be adopted to avoid that memories of the past get totally lost. Like the traditional capabilities that are shown in these photos, where a lady is just gilding the figurehead of the Palinuro, a three-masted sailing vessel used for training boatmen. You see, this lady is still working in the Navy Arsenal, but it's the only survivors of a group of people that retired many years ago. You see, he was the younger, pupils, and she learned perfectly how to deal with this matter. Every year, Palinuro go at sea, make a long cruise, and the figurehead is extremely exposed to the sea. And Palinuro, that was the helmsman of keep in his hand the rudder, and rudder is exposed. Every year we have to rebuild the arms and the rudder and reface and part of the figurehead. But well, let me say that a first attempt of modernization started some years before the last decision taken by the Navy, and started in 1998 when I was sent to La Spezia as a director of the Navy Arsenal. I already had a good knowledge of the establishment, having served as head of underwater weapons department for 4 years, between 1980 and 1984. Plus, I would say, 2 unforgettable years spent in Sicily as a director of the Augusta Arsenal from 19 up to 1993, 1991 up to 1993. I said unforgettable because there really a person is exposed to the maximum threat due to the fact that it was a time in which we had a lot of criminals and in Sicily it was a really dangerous area to act. But I don't know. And when I came to La Spezia, oh sorry, it has been enlarged without a request, and so I can't read. Let me just return back. I don't know what happens here. I think I have to play. without any support, because I can't return back. You know, how can? Okay, that's the
Yeah.
part. Thank you so much. Okay. Back to La Spezia, I found a declining structure. Aged buildings in strong need of maintenance, a reduced number of employees and workers. I had at the time, I had only 2,000 people, 30% less than the 14 years before, and the rate of retirements of more than 100 people per year, uncompensated. The training center existing inside of the naval base was closed due to a lack of new recruitments, and a few money was available for renewal of equipment and infrastructures. In my view, we were just heading to catastrophe in less than 10, 15 years. And so the question was for me, how could we react? Building and infrastructure were old, okay. Let's see what we can get, if we can get money from external sources. So the training center was open to the city professionals training centers, and the building was totally restored through the European Community funds, and still in W, and now is still in W's for the Navy of the city. Some workshops were to be abandoned. Well, why don't we allow the exploitation of those infrastructure for external events? So I invented the SMART initiative. SMART stands, it's an acronym. It's not, but it is useful for saying that probably what the idea was SMART. But now it's changed, the name is changed, and Sea Future is a biennial event that was invented with the full support of the city and the municipality. Funds for the adaptation of buildings were and are still provided by the organizers. We have paid the price because refitting of buildings was not made exactly along a line of preservation. Dry dock equipment needed to be repaired or replaced. Okay, so the decision was, let's utilize dry docks for merchant vessels and not only for naval vessels. Indeed, nothing new. It was a current practice also at that time, also before my time, but the money earned had to be given to the state treasury, not remain. It will not remain inside of the arsenal and not inside of the defense budget. And so it was a loss of money for us. So how could the arsenal have at least its part of advantage? Quite simple. We invented a new procedure of direct compensation. I give you the dry dock, give me back the maintenance of the dry dock. It's quite simple, but it required a law. It was not possible for a director but it was, we are in Italy, sometimes it happened that you can anticipate the law. And in fact, I had to wait a couple of years, returning back to Rome, proposing the law that was approved. And so then what was done in the past was saved, and still now the law exists. The arsenal was old, and so let's open the establishment to external visitors. organizing an open tour. At least we get no money for this, but at least we had motivation to the workers working under the eyes of people. It's a strong motivation of people, so because they understand that their work is important, and that in secondary role was to put some pressure on politicians for getting their support. Political support meant probably was the hope. Okay, we give us money to survive. So open again the recruit of workers. And then the concept arsenale visitabile, or arsenal open to the public visitor, was approved at the level of the Chief of the Navy and entered in full activity in 1999. So let me find advance, suppose, no, this one. Okay, now Gulf of La Spezia. I think that everybody around here know where La Spezia is. It's midway between Genoa, this most famous, and Pisa, another famous for the Leaning Tower. And this is the Gulf of La Spezia, taken from Google Map, and so we can explore also in enlarging the view. But here you can see red stars are related to identify the most important fortification built in 19th century. We will be back on the first in the, I don't know if I can, let me say, okay, this is the area, the Gulf of La Spezia. This island is the Palmaria Island, Tino, and a small island here, Tineto. This coast is the Cinque Terre, 5 lands coast. It's famous around the world because it's visited by 100,000 people every year. They don't stop in La Spezia and they move to 5 lands. If we have time for discussing, I would say that here in this area, we have 2 forts already given to the municipality of Porto Venere. Yes? Oh no. You didn't see the marker. Okay. Perhaps I can. Okay. This is the Palmaria Island. This fort has been already given to the municipality of Porto Venere here. And this is still covered by weeds, simply trees. It's a big fort built in the 19th century and utilized, still not in use. But the whole island, I am afraid, has been open to speculation. So I don't know what could happen in the island in the future. This is a fort located in Lerici. This one is located in Porto Venere. Here, the green dot identify the Navy arsenal. So maybe move a step forward. Here you can see the main gate of the naval base and the naval arsenal of La Spezia. Naval base and naval arsenal overlap. So in the past time, we only called, the whole area was called the Arsenale di La Spezia. And so naval base, it was simply included in now there is a sort of separation. We'll see why along my presentation. The structure is facing the Lagora Canal, just here. It could be navigated by small boats for admiral mainly, for reaching from ships directly the entrance of the arsenal, and also it's facing the main street of the city of La Spezia. On the left side of the building, you can see the entrance of the Naval Technical Museum. This one is called Museo Navale, but it's the Naval Technical Museum is the precise denomination. I'd like to underline an almost unique characteristic of this museum. Here, the naval history is mainly presented through objects, equipment, and people related to the ship design and construction. So it's not an historical museum only, but it's mainly dedicated to technical naval architecture. An area of the museum is dedicated to naval weaponry, to experiments conducted by Guglielmo Marconi, who performed tests to evaluate the characteristics of radio transmission at sea. We are calling it, this was made around, the experiment were made at the beginning of the last century. And a very nice area fully dedicated to the ship's figureheads is arranged in the first floor of the building. Unfortunately, the space assigned to the museum is very limited, and the largest part of items cannot be presented to the public and are stored in precarious condition in some building inside the naval base. So why precarious? Because those buildings have been abandoned. And roof are sometimes are ruined, and so water can enter and is causing damages. Other equipment and materials form a sort of distributed museum in the naval base, but they are not open to the public. Two of them deserve, in my view, to be mentioned: the lighthouse optical system and signals, and the mine warfare equipment collection. They are still inside of the naval base, but not part of the Naval Museum. And in my view, if you can get additional spaces, these have to be moved inside of the Naval Museum, because it is a nonsense to have items that have of real value stored inside, protected. In this case, they are protected, but are inside of some building and visible only to sailors and not more than that. The Second World War, the arsenal and as well as the naval base were heavily bombed, and many materials went lost. Presently, the museum is a part of the Navy, and the personnel assigned are civil servants. The director normally is a Navy officer or a retired Navy officer, but in the near future, even if the property will remain to the Italian Navy, operational management could be assigned to a private entity. It's already now decided. For a possible expansion of the Naval Technical Museum, we are now conducting a feasibility study trying to link or connect this project with the renewal process of the arsenal of the naval bases. But I want to underline that we don't have a master plan. including this as a part of the project, because we have a master plan for the arsenal, so the industrial part. We have including another master plan with some interconnection, but not full interconnected with the master plan of for the naval base for the industrial side. But the expansion of the naval museum is not foreseen. This renewal process started. The process of expanding this renewal process started around 15 years ago. It was for the I'm talking about the naval base and arsenal. It's a huge investment, distributing over in about 25 years, and it is dedicated to the three main Italian Navy bases and arsenals of Taranto, Augusta in Sicily, and La Spezia. But my intervention obviously will focus only on La Spezia and mainly on what should be preserved during this process of renewal, in which the need of modernization seems strong contrast with the preservation of an historical heritage. Just for mentioning, we have lost in the last few months an amount of industrial system that have been destroyed, cut in pieces, and sold as a steel, not more than that. And just for explaining the complication of protecting and presenting what is available in within the Naval Museum, that some items, steam engines, are placed just in the garden, it's an open. So if I can show you the images of those two engines. Oh, sorry. Images of those two engines. 10 years ago, they were still painted. Now are simply rusted. See, the area of the figurettes is brand new. It's let me say, it's wonderful. It's a space assigned for this, and this is for models. Models of ships. And so this is the one of the articles written in 1991. The acceptance of the tourists, the Arsenal apre al turismo, means that the arsenal open to the tourism, was appreciated by the municipality, and we had in a few months. We had, let me say, thousands and thousands of people entering in groups with a small train, and with the guards were trained to become, how do you call it in English, presenters, presenters, okay, guide, and so it was a real effective. We had a lot of people, and I would say that it was perfectly safe because they were in group. They were all the area were surrounded by protected in order to avoid any interference. It was not our word. It was the safety of the people visiting an area where there were crane, there were machine working, and so on. But so it was perfectly safe. But things stopped. I want to say that this idea was not shared by everybody, also in the Navy, in the Navy. When I was moved to Rome, this idea survived until the September 11, 2001. Then the base was closed because of terrorism and is still closed for this. But let me back. Okay, I have to speed a little bit. So let me identify and shorten the history of La Spezia. Because La Spezia is a new city. It's not an old one like Venice or Genoa. It's a new city. It's an invention of the Navy, of the Royal Navy at the time, because it was a small village of 3,000 people only. And the area of La Spezia was simply a swamp. Not more, it was a swamp. It was unsafe to live in the area at that time. So the first mention that we have found is Strabo, a Greek geographer and historian, that described the Port Lunae, but it's unclear to us if it is describing the Bay of La Spezia or Lune. It's another area close to Carrara. In fact, La Spezia didn't exist for 12th century. It was a small village, small houses, only a few settlements in the Malaric swamp. In 1250, a small village was formed to assist merchants passing in the area. They were Hospitia, and was named then Spezia, and then Spezia. So the name became Spezia in 1250. In fact, it was changed quickly. In 1371, La Spezia was fortified along wall and castles. It was under the aegis of Genoa. Let me just align the two on the left. Okay, 1805, we are, okay. La Spezia was annexed to the Napoleonic Empire. And the whole Gulf was evaluated as to become the main harbor for the French fleet. Look at in 1810, Trafalgar had already played a role, important role. And you know that Toulon was always under shares by the Royal Fleet, the Royal Navy. In 1815, the falls of the Roman Empire and the city was absorbed in the expanding kingdom of Piedmont and Sardinia. From 1852 to 1855, Cavour, minister of the kingdom, got the approval of a bill for the construction of an arsenal in Spezia. The idea of the Napoleon to build an arsenal was abandoned in the area of La Spezia. The area was abandoned because it was much closer to the entrance of the bay. The new project was assigned to a major of the army at that time in 1860, Domenico Chiodo, presented the plan for the new arsenal. And you see the idea. The idea of it was not simply a proposal, was a proposal already approved by the kingdom parliament. And let me just underline one point. See, the arrow is visible? No. Okay. See the dimension of the arsenal. Including this, and the dimension of the city at that time. The black side are simply the existing building, and the other building had to be constructed, but following the plan designed by Domenico Chiodo. On the 13th August 1862, start of the work of the construction. Cavour, that gave his approval, was already dead, died before seeing the beginning of the work. Just for giving you an idea of the dimension of the enterprise, at the beginning, the whole area was a swamp. I said of 100 hectares wide, and the area was transformed in a small city, an arsenal, and a naval base. Here, you see the amount of work you can imagine. It was a city that was constructed in less than 7 years, or better, in 7 years exactly. Let's move ahead. Look at the dimension of people. Here you see a man and all the works for internal docks were made in dry condition for speeding up the works. And the sea was open at the end, simply. On the 28th of August 1869, inauguration of the arsenal with the opening of the internal docks at sea. This is the opening ceremony, was attended by a fleet of coming from all around the world, and mainly given, I think, the United States flag is just shown. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Then the opening. It took more than 3 days to fill the internal docks. Luckily, 7 months later, Domenico Chiodo died at the age of 44 due to a sort of mysterious disease. In November 69, in fact, he was invited to an inauguration of the Suez Canal and spent some time visiting the pyramids. So a legend want him victim of the heavens of Tutankhamun. That's a legend, but the man is a legend in itself, because this is the man, and I want to just underline a fact. He was the author of a true miracle, let me say. It's worth mentioning that the man who had the responsibility of investment of tens of millions of lire at that age, that means billions of euros nowadays, left his family in condition of need. His family, after his death, his family could only survive thanks to a concession of a state license of selling tobacco, salt, and drugs in the province of Savona. Wonder how time is changed nowadays. In the following years, the arsenal was completed. Here you see the so-called Mancina Hydraulica, or the hydraulic crane that was presented by Professor Zahn, demolished in La Spezia in the 18th was one of the lost things. They make a nonsense. We have a lot of area that were available. So it was simply a nonsense. It was a decision taken without thinking about the value of an item of this kind. Here in so if you want to see the hair twins is perfectly available inside of the Venice Arsenal that was rebuilt or restored, paid by Fiat Group. I don't remember. I think I was in the when I was responsible for undersea. It was I left the Arsenal in 1884. It was still existing, in my view. I remember it was still existing. It was demolished after that. But no one cares exactly about this. So let me move quickly around. So this giant, and at that time there were giant dry docks operating. Here we have the workshop, artillery workshop. Here you see only a small portion because this building, the total length is 400 meters. And here you see only 100 meters, not more. It's 400 meters. Then ships were built and launched. So you see a steamer. In the next, you see the battleship Dandolo. It was 1878. Then it's a picture, it's not a photograph, but is the launch of the battleship Regina Helen, Queen Helen. Or on this ship, I could say that the original blueprints in my possession and possession belongs, that they will be given to the Naval Museum, as far as the Naval Museum will be able to recover properly those documents. Because I said from a mass of documents that were considered simply paper to be discharged as a things developed quietly over the years. And even during this First World War, the arsenal remained in full swing, as it was far from the front line. It was not true for the arsenal of Venice, that was extremely exposed to the fight of the First World War. But we were just on the other side of not in the Adriatic Sea. But World War II made it clear that the defense of the base started in previous year was not sufficient to protect it. Defense were mainly against artillery shot from fleets. They forgot that during the Second World War, the aerial threat was much more important than potential action of fleets. So the base and the arsenal and a part of the city were totally destroyed by aerial bombardments. And at the end of the war, the situation was like this. This was the result of the Allied raids and plus German army mining after the withdrawal of Italy from the war. When at the end of everything was mined and blown up. So this it's another view of the arsenal inside. And so this is a lot of ships and barges. The arsenal was flattened. More than 300 ships, tugs, barges, boats were sunk in the bay and internal docks. See, you see a serial picture. You see here, you see around. These are called. They are sort of balloons made of steel, in fact, for refloating the vessel that are sunk. They are sort of submersible. Then inside, they submerge when filled of water. They are connected with using divers. They are connected with the ship, and then compressed air pumped inside, and so they reafloat the wreck. And here you see it. This is not a small ship. It was a cruiser that capsized. That it was taken inside of a dry dock for demolition. Another picture showing a long line of wrecks laying in the bay inside. So the bay is quite large. It was full of the wreck. So we got a lesson indeed. We lost more than 20 people. Were lost in simply recovering explosive, in demining what ordnance that was not exploded. But at the end of a long process lasting more than 5 years, the arsenal was already restarted, capable of starting activities. More than 1,000 people were utilized in rebuilding the arsenal, but many capability and equipment were lost forever, like the towing tank inside, because I said that we were building ships, not only building, designing ships. And also the towing tank served as experimental for designing the hull. So reconstruction took place, and in the following year, here we have the mechanical workshop, the piping and boiler workshop, forging and heavy metals, here I have just a comment. Just a couple of months ago, many of the equipment inside of this area have been destroyed, cut in pieces and thrown away. What is worse, that I made clear last year that those equipment must be saved. And this gives you an idea of the power of money, because this area was assigned for an exhibition. They were late, and so everything was allowed to shortening time, because they started late. Everything was destroyed. I could only save one single piece, because it was called Il Cazzotto. It was a sort of instrument, let me say, equipment made in 1868 that was aged the same age of the arsenal. When it was one of the first equipment working, and it was still in use for cold forging of part of the old, old vessels like Vespucci that required cold forging. Was still in use in 2001, and then it has been destroyed in 2023. That's the reason why I am here. But you can now ask, I am spending so much time of my presentation speaking of the past. We have to speak about the future. Also, if the past is something that we have to keep in mind. So I think I can provide an answer to this question with the following view graph. This is an area, interesting area indeed. The foundry became inactive, I think, in 2004, just 2 or 3 years after I left the arsenal. It was abandoned, but you see the future. So after 1990, it became clear that the new technology were requiring different approach and a much larger involvement of private industry. As a consequence, the recruitment of new workers and employees was stopped or limited. I would say almost stopped, simply because we have lost more than 100 people every year. So now the population, the working population inside of the arsenal has been reduced from 2,000 at my time to 400 only, mainly employees, not workers inside of the. So, and the situation is unchanged. So recruitment is stopped for the arsenal of La Spezia. Studies of a new organization started in 1990. I was part of the reorganization studies, and I tried to implement some changes, but they were approved at the appropriate level, so we couldn't get any money for supporting the proposal. A plan, but something changed in 2008 when a plan of investment in the 3 Navy arsenals was approved and financed. It was called Piano Brin, starting in 2008 and is now underway. It's financed with 250 million euro. A limited sum, in my view. Another plan for aligning the fleet support infrastructure to the new environment protection laws has been approved and financed. It's called Piano Blue. That is just recently started. Let me say about the Piano Brin, because the Piano Brin is not well connected with the Piano Blue, but the area is connected, and it's rather strange. But operational need is just to adjust the standard of safety hygiene at work, rationalize processes inside based on a modern industrial criteria, reduce the number of managed buildings, and bring workshops closer to the internal docks and to the executive offices. The goal is to adjust the working areas to the actual production loads, increase productivity, and decrease fixed costs of infrastructure and plant management. Just to give you an idea, to concentrate different area of works in only one building is the strategy. This is just one view, but many buildings are going to be concentrated, and other areas will be assigned to the naval base as well as private industry. The plan Base Blue, okay, is adaptation to NATO operating standards, new mooring spaces for ships. We have an aircraft carrier now, and so it's a large ship that cannot enter in La Spezia naval base nowadays. So we have to deep dredge deep dredging of the seabed, cold ironing of piers and dock. Cold ironing means that all the ships moored inside of the naval base cannot start engines for producing electricity, just to stop pollution in the area. Alignment to the EU environmental energy saving standards. So a lot of panels for producing energy are within the plan. A big investment is in the, I want to just underline a fact. In La Spezia, many abandoned military structures have been already given to the city or to the municipalities around the bay. Shelters and forts, former Navy hospital has been transformed in detachment of the University of Genoa, as a role here. Headquarters of the district of the marine technology, a part of the has been given to the city as a hospital. Building inside the naval have been adapted to or given on loan as university labs, professional training centers, and to the companies. Without a plan, but they were by heart, let me say. They have made a request, they had the fortune to have strong political support, and that's the result. So, everything okay? Not really. We have lost a lot of things. We are continue to lose things that need to be preserved, in my view. A long list of boats, ships, small ships, industrial equipment, build even buildings. I will go through very quickly to some, let me say, a sample of some 1-2% of this boat belongs to is abandoned. It belongs to, it's a boat of Vespucci, abandoned. There are 2 of them. Another is a vessel that has been given used for 2 Antarctic mission in 1973 and 74, and still in the area. It's laying there, is almost abandoned. I am trying to save something. This is a Leudo. It's nothing to do with the naval asset, but it's part of the history of naval construction in Liguria. Foundry. This is the building. You see, is a historical building, very large. Let me say square, and let me just move. This is inside. It was stopped. Production was stopped in 2004. It's still abandoned. Here you see models made of wood, made since everything is stored inside. So we have items that have been produced in 1865, 69, 70, and so on. This is what I called the Liberty Space, because due to the column made of iron, and the area is abandoned, but colors due to mushrooms and the painting of green, everything stopped. And we have also table of works that have been abandoned. Still, they simply left the building that was abandoned. The same happens to old equipment of divers because they are not still in use. The danger is that is not that they go to, they are stolen sometimes, and we find those many of that. But what is going to be lost is the capability to work and to do, to make things. Another item is an arsenal existing under the mountain. You see, when it was abandoned, on the 22nd of April, Wednesday at 17:19 p.m. Inside a genset, two big generators, and an entire workshop made mechanical, electrical workshop, electronic, and so on, test point, and so and so. Other plants of historical value are dispersed around inside of building, abandoned building. Here we have something, it's a last part of a torpedo of the built in 1870 around, a torpedo of the Second World War. And let me say, another point, this one, let me find a locker room with a bronze sinks that lightly tap like this, ring like a bells with different tone because there are small differences. So you can play, yes. And so let me move quickly here at the area of expansion of the Naval Museum. The red is the part, the existing part. The yellow is the proposed for the expansion. Here you have the aerial view of the area. Of the expansion. This is the area of the Naval Museum, the area of expansion. Sensibility of the city is that they are requiring the area for making a parking lot. The area of expansion will contain naval aviation, traditional sailing boats, a submarine, an armed train, an area dedicated to underwater technology, a repair workshop open to the public, shelter experience, the art of shipbuilding, a traditional workshop equipment, and simulators, navigation simulators. This is the new, another building that at present is the direct shipyard, will be totally dedicated to the library, a 4-story building, and Arsenal Directorate will be fully dedicated to the new library that is dispersed everywhere. And this will be dedicated to Frederick Chapman, and I have already this area, the Ars Navalis, and dedicated to Frederick Chapman. That is the true first naval architect, Swedish architect. Quickly, the second floor. Conclusion. The Special Navy base will remain the most important asset of the Italian Navy. So it will remain operational, fully operational, as well as a naval base and arsenal. the area dedicated to the museum, another part will be on loan for private industry. We are trying to include the expansion of Nail Museum inside the modernization program. If we will succeed, okay, we will succeed. If not, we have to be prepared to lose another part of our history. And say that it's true that we're looking at Portsmouth and to the Victory. It's true that it's a historic vessel. This is already becoming historical too, but it's square rigged and it's still in operation. Is an attraction everywhere she moves, and it was an attraction inside. When stops for work every year, stops for 8 months, is an attraction when it is dry docked, and so that the option visitor of opening the arsenal will be considered again as a possibility, a true possibility, not simply an hope or an idea. That's true. That's all. Sorry, I went too long.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting case as well. And in a sense, I mean, we can compete on bad practice, no?
No, I don't think that we have to compete. I think that we have to cooperate.
Absolutely.
Because I have seen one thing. Let me just express my feeling. I've seen that you have, following what has happened in the Arsenal of Venice, it's something that have a logic. The difference is between amateur, like my action, and professional, like your action.
Yeah.
So we have to move, let
Absolutely.
me say, from amateurs and to find, we have to develop a new plan, a new master plan, including also the history, if you want to stay on the winning part and not always on the losing part.
Sure.
Because now in the losing part, it's my
I totally
perception.
agree. It was just, yeah, you know what? It's really, even legally, I was astonished to see how they were able to destroy. Here in Venice, the crane was included in the vincolo, in the vincolo di tutela. So it's really interesting. I mean, and here, this is very interesting as a case, which in a sense is a bit even more dangerous than Venice, because it's still working, and this idea, of cleaning or getting rid of old stuff. So I think that is something we can try to investigate. Need the help. We as a university, the university could help from that point of view in supporting you in developing. We can really try to do something. University of Bologna and Oxford and other universities could, and also making, perhaps as one of the outcomes of this workshops, something that could be, putting the attention. One of the things that is crazy in this world, even with the Venice Arsenal, nobody knows anything out of Venice. And I'm still, I'm reading the Venetian Journal digitally every morning, and there's nothing out of Venice about that. And also, it's the first time I'm hearing about La Spezia as well. Well, this is really the destruction of heritage. I mean, the things that were destroyed this year, it's crazy that we're not.
It's crazy, and it's also because they can't. We didn't know the importance of that because they have documents. They have documents inside, but I think that when I spoke with the mayor of the municipality of La Spezia, he said repeatedly, he repeated, I wonder, you must give us the area strongly need for making a parking lot. I said, okay, listen, how many car you can park in that area? For instance, the car that are needed for 2 buildings front in front, not more than that. And then you have solved the problem of car inside of the city simply because you take an area of 100 meter for 40 meters.
Yeah.
It's a nonsense, let me say. But they don't understand the importance of having an history,
Yeah, sure.
something to tell. If you want to, for instance, making we have a lot of documents. When I saw documents thrown away, there were all the drawings of ships built by Fincantieri. At that time, it was not Fincantieri. It was a name built since the First World War.
Mamma mia.
All thrown away. They were recovered by people stealing all this. I don't want to say during that time because it was made the agreement of okay, it's not important. Take this, but we throw everything away. So we could save part of an history, but people simply didn't understand this.
Yeah, I think that's something we can try to include in our aims, and even with the IPI, with the I will talk with the president of IPI, the Italian Association of Industrial Heritage, try to see whether we could help and try to make a kind of case out of it in terms of having visibility. You know, these things when are still in between the mayor and nothing really happens. When you're able to take it at a higher level, say, this is heritage, this is industrial heritage, there is a more general kind of political issues on that, and perhaps this is something that we were asking, collecting cases was just, for example, in this, we find someone that perhaps will be useful to include in terms of making stronger the call for industrial heritage protection in general, and shipyards, shipbuildings, history, both the tangible and the intangible, as a part of.
Professor, just taking the advantage of being here in an international arena, let me just underline that when I spoke about the library, the area, the first floor will be fully dedicated to foreign construction, and I propose to assign to all the nations that want to illustrate their capability to assign a space for ships built, ships for technology developed in UK or in Sweden or also in China. For instance, who knows how the Chinese could build a ship that was, let me say, much larger than Vespucci. Much larger, because Vespucci is 14 meters wide, and that the ships built 50 years before the discovery of America by Columbus. The Chinese had a fleet in which the largest ship was the ship, the admiral ship, let me say. It was the largest of the fleet, obviously. And was but the length was around the same of the Vespucci, including the foremast. And the wide was 60 meter wide. 60 meter made of wood. So it's still unclear how they could have a ship of that size made of wood and with 7 masts, that being so large were placed not along the keel. And so this capability has to be known.
Absolutely.
And in terms of also, I mean, a naval architect. So I have proposed this idea was accepted at the level of the command of the North Italy Command, Naval Command. And so I think that it will be proposed. So it's an issue. I think it's important for us, but it can also be, let me say, a good opportunity for other nations to have a center where their history can be found.
Yeah. I'm sorry we are running out of time, so we need to close. So that's very in case, and we'll keep in touch, as we say. But seriously, we are available to discuss if you need any kind of support from both the universities, this project, and the Association of Industrial Heritage. So thanks so much. And okay, so we have this busy, very interesting morning as a starting from this project, and what we have today will be available on the homepage of IPI. Thanks again to the IPI, to Luca Pugini, to Angela, and thanks again Ca' Foscari, Venice University, and keep in touch and see you on September 30, both in person and or online. Okay. Anything, Pigram? Okay.
Just to say thank you all. I will with you there in Venice, and I look forward to being there for the next session in September.
Great. Ciao, Pigram. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for those that follow us on the streaming. Thanks again. Bye-bye. Ho capito, sul serio se ha bisogno che facciamo un'azione di legittimazione con...
This is proposte per lo sviluppo della nazionalità della Spezia, dated 1998, just a few months, November 1998. And here was the proposal for, at that time, we built a mast, the mast of the sailing ship, as well as the forging. At that time, number of models still existing. We have lost at least 70% of the models. Page 1998.